It's called this evening's meeting of the City Council to order. Welcome H. Wayne Wilson and his listening audience at WCBU as well as Cable Channel 22. Madam Clerk, the council microphones are open for roll call.
Mayor Artis.
Here.
Councilmember Ali. Councilmember Sear.
Here.
Councilmember Grayeb. Councilmember Jensen. Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Montalongo. Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach.
Here.
And Councilmember Ruckriegel. Here. You have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'd like to invite everyone to join us and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. We have one proclamation tonight. I'd like to invite Joe Doolin and his team up for Great Neighbor Appreciation Week. Whereas the City of Peoria Community Development Department aims to create a safer, cleaner, and more connected Peoria, and whereas neighborhoods play an integral part in maintaining and promoting a high quality of life in the City of Peoria, and whereas in a world where technology and our ability to travel across great distances has caused a loosening in the bonds of our local community, it's of the utmost importance to honor our neighbors who go above and beyond to forge a sense of community in an increasingly polarized world. And whereas the City of Peoria Community Development Department is hosting the 4th annual Great Neighbor Appreciation Week with a week-long celebration to encourage residents to reach out to their neighbors, create new friends, and express gratitude to those who make our neighborhoods and the city a great place to live. And whereas Great Neighbor Appreciation Week provides the residents of Peoria with opportunities to show their appreciation for their neighbors while being reminded of what it means to be a great neighbor. Now, therefore, I, Jim Artis, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby proclaim Great Neighbor Appreciation Week in Peoria, Illinois. Joe Doolin, who is the captain of this team and has really done a lot to help us promote this event, is going to give us a little more. I would like to say that it's only Tuesday, but I've already noticed a lot of attention in the community about this, and that's what we want to do, is really energize the community, get them to participate, and help make our neighborhood stronger. So thanks for what you and all your team are doing.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome. Thank you to the mayor and council and city manager for allowing us to present this proclamation tonight. While we're up here accepting the proclamation is really for all of the great neighbors in the city of Peoria. Code enforcement in the Community Development Department spends a lot of time doing enforcement throughout the community, but we don't have to do as much enforcement because we have an amazing amount of great neighbors in the city of Peoria. About 4 or 5 years ago, we started handing out good job door hangers at properties to recognize those properties we don't have to deal with on a daily basis. Sometimes we take for granted the people that do the small things like just keep their grass cut, pick up litter around the city. And when we started handing out those good job door hangers, we really felt the community embrace the appreciation of just saying thanks for the work they're doing. So we created the Great Neighbor Appreciation Week about 4 years ago in a way for our department in the city of Peoria to really appreciate them an entire week, celebrate their success, and celebrate all of the great things that they're doing for our community that makes this city such a great place to live. Our city does have issues that we're all aware of and working on, but there's also a lot of great things happening, and we all our monikers to appreciate Peoria, and there's a lot of things about Peoria to appreciate. So we have a whole week-long list of activities that my staff, who's here tonight to help me with, get this proclamation. I want to introduce them real quick. Kaylee Dre, she's our Neighborhood Enhancement Coordinator. Dawn Scally, she's with their Code Enforcement Division. Galen Ford, he's with our Code Enforcement Division. And Ahmed Bradley, he's with our Code Enforcement Division as well. So they've spent a significant amount of time yesterday going door to door, going around the different neighborhoods, just handing out good job door hangers to all the properties that are just doing a great job keeping up with their properties. Sometimes when we hand out good job door hangers, we don't just focus on the people who spend thousands of dollars on landscaping. It's about people who are just cutting their grass, picking up litter, even people who have tall grass, but then when we go back after giving them a notice and it gets cut, then we take time to say thank you to them too. So it's not just about spending money or doing those. It's just about appreciating the neighborhood they live in. This morning, we spent some time with Steve Tyler and his litter crew up at Bradley, picking up some litter on Main Street. Tomorrow, we're going to be out at Northwoods Mall, having people fill out postcards of what they appreciate about Peoria and kind of using it for a community art project. Thursday is kind of our big event, Cookies with Community Development. There's 7 locations around Peoria, all spread out throughout the community. We have about 25 community development staff members who are participating. It's just a chance to go meet staff, say hello. If you have any issues, any concerns, any feedback, we're happy to hear them. Friday, we're using as an opportunity to appreciate local and small business in the city of Peoria. They contribute to making our community a great place to live as well. Special thanks, if you'll notice our shirts. They were designed by Denise Hall of Pink Lion Design, which is a small business in the city of Peoria. She did a fantastic job for us. And then Saturday, we'll be down at the riverfront, just encouraging people to appreciate the city we live in. So, Mayor, Council, I know I speak for everyone when I say we just really appreciate all of the great neighbors in Peoria and hope to see you this week. So, thank you.
Councilman Reckriegel.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the minutes of the regular City Council meeting held on June 25th, 2019 as printed.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Graber. Any corrections or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
We're at the township portion of the meeting. 19-219 is a request from the town officials to approve the June 2019 actual expenditures and to approve the July 2019 anticipated expenditures for the town of the city of Peoria.
Thank you. Trustee Graham.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve as outlined.
Okay, motion to approve, seconded by Trustee Sear. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
19-222 is a request to concur. It's 19-220, the annual town financial report from April 1, 2018 to March 31, 2019 for the town of the city of Peoria with a recommendation to receive and file.
Trustee Graham.
Mr. Chairman, I would like our township official, Patrick Nickdean, our treasurer, to approach the bench and explain why we need to defer this item.
Okay. Mr. Treasurer.
Trustee, the request to transfer is because of the financial notes from your preliminary budget that was presented months ago. There's been significant changes in that regard. There's still one outstanding issue regarding those footnotes, and there's been discussion going on today. Part of that is to clear up information that had been previously discussed with members of the trustees. And so with that change, it's to provide clarity. And so until that is done, it won't be coming forward.
And a footnote does not necessarily mean something insignificant.
No, the footnotes are to provide explanation, provide clarity and transparency to the audit.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to defer this item for
I would say give it a month.
for 1 month.
Okay. Motion to Move this ahead 1 month, seconded by Trustee Moore. Is there discussion on this deferral? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
We're at the consent agenda. 19-221 is a request to concur with the recommendation from the staff to waive the requirement for a setback encroachment agreement for property located at 710 West Detweiler Drive. 19-222 is a request to concur with the recommendation from staff to waive the requirement for a setback encroachment agreement for property at 1106 West Main Street. 19-223 is a request to approve the submission of an application for a Build 2019 discretionary grant in an amount not to exceed $25 million from the U.S. Department of Transportation for improvements to Main Street from the Illinois River to Farmington Road. 19-224 is a request to approve and authorize the settlement of Timothy Kelly's claim in the amount of $67,500. 19-225 is the reappointment by Mayor Ardis to the Planning and Zoning Commission with a request to concur of George Grebe. 19-226 is a reappointment by Mayor Ardis to the Public Arts Advisory Commission of Jane O'Haver. 19-227 are appointments and a reappointment by Mayor Ardis to the Riverfront Program and Policy Advisory Committee with a request to concur of Patrick Wilmington, Sean Crumby, and Susie Stockman. 19-228 are appointments by Mayor Ardis to the Advisory Committee on Police and Community Relations with a request to concur of Andre Allen and Karen Wilson. 19-229 is an appointment by Mayor Ardis to the Constitution Garden Advisory Committee with a request to concur of Darren Graves. 19-230 are appointments and reappointments by Mayor Ardis to the Transportation Commission of Colin Code, Jason Snyder, Bernard Goteen, Sean Allen, and Joe Hudson. 19-231 are appointments and a reappointment by Mayor Ardis to the Downtown Advisory Commission of Kimberly McGee, Peter Kobach, and Kevin Evans. 19-232 is an appointment and reappointments by Mayor Ardis to the Zoning Board of Appeals with a request to concur of Laith Al-Kafaji, Richard Russo, and Ryan Cannon. And 19-233 is a request to approve the committee report, which are the policy session minutes regarding affordable housing. That completes your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any items to remove from consent this evening? Seeing none, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Dr. Ali, seconded by Councilman Sear. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
We have a presentation. 19-234 is a request to receive and file a presentation on the preliminary projected 2019 fiscal year end budget and projected 2020 to 2021 biennial budget.
Okay. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We just have several slides that we want to go through this evening that talks about the preliminary budget outlook for 2020 and 21. This is a budget year where we put together a biennial budget, so it's a 2-year spending plan for both fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 21. Moving forward with this, to just kind of summarize what our current budget looks like, we currently have a $204.3 million budget. It is comprised primarily of public safety and infrastructure spending. If you look at it, 45% of our budget is public safety, police, fire, emergency communications, and 31% is infrastructure, which would be all of the things that we have in public works, transportation, stormwater, sewers, sidewalks, all of that's comprised, facilities in that 31%. The next largest size in the budget is for arts, culture, and education at 10%. That includes the library, the Civic Center, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Arts Partners. That's all rolled up in that kind of bucket of arts, culture, and education. Under economy and livability, that's really our economic development and community development efforts, includes all of our TIF districts. And then we have 6% in stewardship, which is really just administration. And many of the departments that you have is back of the house support for many of our line departments. Where does the money come from? The budget for 2019 is that we currently are operating under assumes that we're going to collect $206 million, $206.7 million in revenue. As a city, we are extremely reliant on sales taxes to fund our operations. 24% of our budget comes from sales taxes. The second largest source of revenue are property taxes at 19% of the budget. And then obviously, we rely on the state for a number of revenue streams, both sales tax, income tax, motor fuel taxes, and then as well corporate income taxes. And so those are important needs that we have as well as part of the budget. Looking ahead, as we look towards 2020, there's a couple of negative factors that I want to walk through as we look at this budget. The first being our population. We are in the fifth year of population decline. It's currently down 1.3% from what we had as a population inside the city last year. From a high in 2003 of 116,479 people, we're down 4.3% over the last 5 years. So that's a concern. Obviously, that means fewer people purchasing goods, going out to eat, spending money inside the city. We're not alone. I think Illinois overall is seeing that across the board. There are a number of communities that are seeing population declines throughout the state of Illinois. The second negative factor that we want to talk about is our property tax base. Because we're seeing that decline in population, we're also seeing that effect in our property tax base. In discussions with the County Supervisor of Assessments, we're looking at an estimate for next year, for the 2019 year that would be collected in 2020, of a property tax base contraction of 2.5%. So that's combined with the 2.58% property tax base contraction that we had in 2018. It's showing that right now we don't have a very strong real estate market here inside the city of Peoria. What that means is that when you have property tax base contraction, if you're going to raise the same dollar amount of property tax levy, you actually have to raise your property tax rate in order to do that. So, or if you keep your property tax rate the same, your rate, then you're going to collect less in revenue. And I think that when we've looked at it, to keep the rate the same, it would be about $1 million reduction in the amount of property taxes that we'll be bringing in next year. But once again, looking at that, as part of the overall budget, we are still only 12% of every property tax dollar that comes to the city. The lion's share of the funding goes to schools. That's where the lion's share of property taxes goes. And we're seeing that while this says 58%, if we look at the distribution based upon the two largest school districts we have, I believe that Peoria Public Schools would be closer to 60% when you add in ICC and Peoria Public Schools. And then in School District 323, it's about 55% is what we're looking at there. So overall, the city of Peoria's property tax levy, as you can see, beginning in 2015, our levy actually went up. That was when the very top of this area chart, you can see the orange-colored portion of that bar. That's when in 2015 we started putting $3.2 million of property taxes towards road construction. So that's about 14% of the budget currently, or 14% of the total levy for the city. The pensions is the largest block of that. You can see that's the green portion that consumes almost 86% of the city's property tax levy. There's less than 1% of the city's property tax levy currently that is going towards operations. It's about $76,000 in this calendar year. As we look at the next fiscal year, we won't have anything that we'll be levying in the general fund. We won't. It will be entirely in pensions and in roads. So one point here that I want to make is that you can start to see with the green bar that the amount of the property tax levy has moderated, has flattened off. But we still have the public pension obligations that we have to make. We're making that up through two different ways. Because the council, and this was your policy decision, last year said during the budget you did not want to increase property taxes. We've had to make that up with a transfer from the general fund to cover the cost of those public safety pensions, and also by the imposition of the public safety pension fee. And we'll be sending those bills out to the community here in the third quarter. They'll go out. Is anticipated to generate $1.2 million of revenue in 2019, $1.6 million of revenue in 2020, and then $2 million in 2021, and then the fee sunsets after that, and it would be sunsetting. So the challenge that we have is that we're going to have to make that money up somewhere once that pension fee goes out, and that may come from the increased change that the General Assembly has made on internet sales, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute. To look at the biggest cost driver that we have, which is police and fire pension costs, we looked at a couple of things here that I just wanted to point out for you. Last year, we told you that we had we had about $1.4 million of increased payments due to the increases in 2018 for public safety pensions. Back in 2018, we had a little over $600 million of accrued liability in all of our funds, and we had roughly about $311 million of actuarial value assets, which left us with roughly about $275 million of unfunded liabilities. What happened in the fourth quarter of last year is both the police and fire pension funds, like everyone else in the stock market, took major hits, and we saw significant losses. The fire pension fund lost $18.4 million, and the police pension fund lost $19.2 million. That lowered our funded ratios in 2019 to 48% for fire, 51% for police. And what it did is it increased our unfunded liabilities to now where we have almost $315 million of unfunded pension liabilities for both police and fire combined. As the Department of Insurance gave us the actuarial analysis on that, we had anticipated that we would see about a $1.6 million increase in our need to contributions that we would need to make for fire and police. It's actually coming in at about $2.6 million. So there's $1 million there of unanticipated increases that we're going to have to make up going forward in 2020. So while we've built into our kind of long-term budget projections 8% growth in public safety pension costs, we may have to revisit that in the out years and start to look at a higher number just based upon the performance that the funds are carrying. So in addition to police and fire, we have also seen and received notice from IMRF that we're going to be receiving a rate increase from IMRF up to I think 11.67%. I think is the phased-in rate. I think it's 14% if we pay it the full rate that we can. They allow us to take a lower rate if we want to opt for that lower rate, and we're going to see some increased obligations for FICA and Medicare as well. So we have all of those kind of coming in at the same time, and it means about $1.5 million more in these pension obligations that we're going to have to make up going into next year. This is just a quick snapshot of our 10-year headcount. The one thing I want to point out here, based upon all of the headcount reductions that the city made in 2018 for the 2019 budget, we are at the lowest level of employment for the city in 25 years. So this is the lowest level that we've been at in terms of headcount to deliver services to the community. The other negative factor that we have that we're looking at for next year is the garbage fund. Currently, the garbage fund owes the general fund about $4.5 million. The current $18 fee does not cover our expenses. The budget that was adopted this past year actually increased the amount of money that's owed to the general fund by about $600,000 or just under $600,000. So if we were to raise the garbage fee to $21 a month, this would allow us to begin to replenish the general fund and repay it back. Just for example's sake, this shows an assumed increase to $21 a month. It's already scheduled to go up from 18 to 19. So if we move it up to $21 per month, it would allow us to start to chip away at what we owe the general fund. So at this point, what I'm going to do is maybe turn over to Finance Director Scroggins to talk a little bit about where we are in the current year. This is a snapshot of the second quarter and where we look at compared to the spending plan that we put together back in the fall of 2019 or 2018. Excuse me.
Thank you. In front of you, or up on the screen, is the projections for the year end based on second quarter information. Currently, we're projecting home rule sales tax and state sales tax to finish about 2% under budget. Through March, we're about 5% under budget. As I've spoke to you earlier in the last couple months, talking about January being a really kind of a disastrous month for sales tax. We are starting to recover. I'm not panicking at this point. I think our month-to-month for March was about 0.9% below last year, so it does look like we're getting back to some normal spending. As is usual, our local use taxes are screaming, which I think the manager's going to talk about now, the internet sales tax later, but that will be a positive coming forward. So it's not all doom and gloom this time. There's some good news. State income tax is coming in about $500,000 higher than anticipated, which is going to offset a lot of the losses in the sales tax at this point. I think there was probably corporate and personal income tax reasons that people took a lot of gains at the end of December for some reason, and the taxes came in much higher than the state anticipated. So we're reaping some of that benefit. So that based on those estimates, I'm estimating revenue to finish at about 94.7, which is about $900,000, 1%, 98% of budget. Looking at expenditure side, we're going to finish projected at about $600,000 under budget, so we're still going to have a change in fund balance of about $1.5 million. We budgeted $2 million. That was part of our policy to get that fund balance built up. So where we're projecting today, which can change tomorrow or when I get the next sales tax numbers coming up for April and May, and $500,000 short of what we planned for 2019.
So I think that's generally pretty positive. I think overall that some of the challenges I think that we're facing with some of the larger workers' comp and legal expenses are just because of some of the high-profile lawsuits that we've had. I think are some of the challenges that we have there. But generally, I think we're holding the line pretty well. Some other new revenues that are going to have a positive impact on the budget as we go forward come directly out of the state of Illinois' budget, and I want to talk about those as well. The most significant is the changes on the sales tax, and we sent out IML, along with the information we sent you, IML's fact sheet. You should have a copy of that on your desk as well, pertaining to the changes that were made to the sales taxes. And what they're doing is they're trying to level the playing field between brick and mortar retailers and internet providers of merchandise. So beginning on January 1st of 2020, remote retailers and those marketplaces, like Amazon has a marketplace, that have a presence not only in Illinois but outside of Illinois, will now have to charge the state's use tax, which is the tax that we currently receive on other internet sales. Then beginning on July 1st, all of those retailers are going to have to start remitting to the state of Illinois the local sales taxes as well as the state's sales tax. So what that means is we should see a significant amount of revenue coming in from that beginning in July. And I think that what we've estimated now, and pretty conservatively, is about $2 million in 2020, and then more in 2021 as we start to see the full year of that coming into effect. What we will see, though, is the use tax will go down. So we're going to see that reduction as well.
Right, and just realize that in 2020, we only received those taxes in October, November, and December, even though it starts in July, because we had that 3-month lag. So that's why they estimated at $2 million at this point.
So that's a positive. So that's one area that we're looking at, that we're seeing that's going to help us to bring in some additional revenue. The other change was that with the increase in the state's motor fuel tax, there's a portion of that they're going to distribute back to cities and counties as well. As we've looked at that in discussions with the Illinois Municipal League, they've estimated that we should see about a 50% increase in our motor fuel tax, state motor fuel tax distribution. So looking at that, we would see roughly about $1.4 million more coming back to Peoria that we can put directly towards roads. So that's another positive step that we have looked at. So as we've started to just kind of give you a preliminary snapshot of the budget, what Director Scroggins and I have started to do is to say, okay, let's look at increasing the amount of road funding we have by that $1.4 million. So that'll help us to address some of the road construction needs that we have. But let's take that increase that we're seeing in the sales tax and try and put that directly towards that transfer that we have to make out of the general fund that needs to cover some of those pension costs and those pension obligations, so that we're starting to segregate those funds in that way to move it to cover those costs. So in general, or I guess in summary, I should say, the negative factors are the population decline, the assessed value decrease, the higher than projected pension costs, which will be eased, I think, a little bit by that sales tax change for a couple of years. And I say a couple of years because really we're not out of the woods there. After a couple of years, we're gonna have to find another revenue stream to cover those public safety pension costs. And then the garbage fund needing to be reset, it looks like at this point in time that we just need to reduce expenses by about $2 million in 2020, or $1.2 million, and then an additional $1.2 million in 2021, and that will balance us for those 2 years. So compared to where we were last year when we had an $8 million shortfall that we were looking at closing, this is less than 1% of our total spend. So I think that it's something that we're in a better position today than we were last year. So, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the for the update. It is hate to say it's encouraging, but as opposed to looking where we were last year at $8 million hole, covering $2 million, it may sound easy, but as indicated by the slide that showed our staffing, we're at the lowest we've been in 25 years. We've already done that. We've done considerable amounts of reductions, and there's going to have to be more. I hate to say it. I don't know where it's going to come from, and it might not necessarily be head count. It could be programming, but that's why we're going to be starting our budget discussions here in a few weeks to get some extra time on this. The wording of this slide is not lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on anybody else, where it says the city needs to reduce expenses, because that's what we need to do. I think we need to send a really strong message out at the very beginning of our budget discussions this year that we're not going to raise property taxes. I don't think that there's a chance that we can get support around the horseshoe for it, and so we should look at all other options. You always hate to take options off the table when you're just starting these discussions, but I think it's a given that we can send a strong message out to our all of our constituents that we hear what you're saying. The city's portion of your property tax bill is only 12% of that total bill, but we're not going to be the ones hitting them back. So I appreciate the wording in that. I look forward to our budget discussions starting here in a couple weeks, and we're going to have a lot more opportunity for both public and private participation in those discussions as well. I have Councilman Sear next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager, for all your early work here to start the conversation early. This is great. Just three questions. Number one, it's kind of I'm interested in your personal opinion on slide number 3. Why do you think we're down to 111,000 people living in the city of Peoria?
Well, I think there's a number of factors. I think that we've had our share of challenges inside the city, just from our own local economy. But I also think that the state's economic climate is driving a lot of people to leave Illinois, and I think that that's been a major factor that has been pushing people out looking to other states, to move to other states, just based upon the fiscal climate that we have here in Illinois.
Can you be a little bit more specific as to why they're leaving?
Well, I think that Illinois is a high tax state, so there's one of the challenges you have is that it is expensive to live here. We have an over-reliance, as shown here in our property tax distribution, to fund education through property taxes. So we have some of the highest property taxes in the state or in the nation because of that, and I think that plays a part and a factor in people's decisions. I know that businesses make those decisions, and we'll look at the property taxes and say, one of the reasons they're not looking at Illinois is because it's a high tax state.
And just to make sure our constituents understand, when we're talking about taxes, we're talking about property taxes, sales tax, and income tax, correct?
It's everything.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman, I think,
two more questions.
Can I just add one thing that I know you're asking the city manager this, but I don't think that we can wear kid gloves when we're talking about the impact that the decisions in Springfield are having on us. Okay, and I mean I don't necessarily expect the city manager to come out swinging on this one, but when we do something like a $15 an hour minimum wage in this state, and what that's going to do to small business, especially south of I-80, that's huge. That's a lot of businesses that are going to say, I can't take it anymore. We can't do this. We can't afford $15 an hour. So they leave. This isn't all just, about, some of the bigger decisions that they're making in Springfield that are impacting, businesses like our largest employer and others to leave. It's something that doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but $15 an hour minimum wage is going to cost this state more jobs than anything they've done to date. And we can look at some of the other things, and that's really one of the reasons that the Municipal League and the mayors across the state are working really hard to try to get Springfield to listen to us about some pension reforms and how we know we can't take pensions away, and that's what we're trying to do. But what we do need to do is recalibrate that and get us to a place to give us a little breathing room. So instead of being 90% funded by 2040, we can push that out to maybe 10 or 15 years or so, just to give us some breathing room. But this situation that we're seeing at a local level is across the state, not just in Peoria, is significantly being caused by bad business decisions in our state capital.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do I get my time back in the 5 minutes? I'm just kidding, sir. Two more questions. Since I'm a financial advisor, I know last quarter of the fourth quarter 2018 was horrible on people's portfolio, and I see obviously it was terrible on our portfolio also for the city. Page 4, I guess we're on. But I know, do we have reports of how we're doing the last 6 months or year to date? Because whatever I know we lost in the fourth quarter last year should have been made up the first 6 months of this year.
I don't have access to that, but we could certainly ask Treasurer Nick Teen to get us copies of that to see where they are.
Yeah, I would just be interested.
I would imagine that it's bounced back somewhat, but part of that is the timing. Unfortunately, this snapshot of when we have to look at making these contributions is factored by that fourth quarter, and it looks at where you were at the end of that calendar year. But
Both funds are up approximately 11%, but when they do an actuary, they do a 5-year smoothing. So previous gains and losses are smoothed over a 5-year period. So in addition to those losses, there's two major factors also playing to the increases in liability, and that's the mortality. The Department of Insurance uses the blue-collar mortality table of year 2014 with adjustments, where the pension fund and probably within the next year or two, the Department of Insurance is going to go to the public safety employees mortality table. Fortunately, in many ways, our public safety employees who put their lives on the line are living longer. The downside is that increases the liability because you have to make additional long-term obligations to make those pension funds, and that also drives that number.
Last question. Thank you, Mr. Nicteen. Last question about the garbage fund. I didn't understand earlier until you and I had a conversation. Your $2 million deficit for next year already says that we have this group, this horseshoe has approved a $2 increase in garbage, correct?
in the initial snapshot that we looked at, we built that into the determination. If the answer is you don't want to raise the fees, you're going to have a $2.6 million hole because you're going to have.
Sure, everybody understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Urick. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I had Councilmember Ali next. Okay. Councilmember Graham.
Well, I feel like we have been in a vehicle that's going down a very winding road here with some of the rhetorical flourishes that I've had to listen to for the past 10 minutes and the editorials from some of us around the horseshoe, all negative narrative about the state of Illinois and also as a corollary of that, the city of Peoria. I find it very interesting that we talk about the minimum wage having such a huge impact on employers when we consider that for years there's been a very, very small increase in that minimum wage, and our middle class has had stagnant wages for about 20 years. And the primary driver of success and prosperity in this country, 2/3 of all the spending of our gross domestic product, is powered by consumers who spend money. So much for some of these editorial posturings that we've had tonight. And also the ridiculous comment that Peoria is such an expensive place to live in. I'm sorry, excuse me, we're the 5th least expensive metropolitan area to live in the entire nation. Folks, we've met the enemy, and it is we. I'm going to be scrutinizing everything that comes out of these budget discussions because there's a lot of assumptions that are built in that are erroneous. It's not only in the report with the words that are used in this report, but it's also in staking out positions before we've had a chance to take a look at all the options. And I'm not prepared to do that, Mayor Artis.
Councilmember Recreago.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions and I guess some comments are requested here as well. On the $4.5 million that the garbage fund owes, and basically that's because it's cheaper debt than if we would go out there and get that somewhere else. And so we really owe it to ourselves. And luckily that's at 0% interest because it's a transfer. How long is it going to take us to pay that back? Because it doesn't appear in our normal debt ratios, I don't think, correct?
No, it's sitting in the fund as money that's owed to the general fund from the garbage fund. It will take us probably at least 7 years to pay this off over time as we start to chisel away at this.
Okay.
So.
And appreciate all the information, and I think this is a good time to have this conversation because I think we're halfway through the year. But one of the things that stands out to me is even with the best forecasting that we had, the best budgeting that we had, to balance a budget again last year, it looks like we're going to be a little less than $600,000 if everything goes as planned, that we're going to miss that mark again. Is that correct?
We will be off by about $600,000 from where we had anticipated. Yes.
That's real money.
And that is, and it's the 600,000. As we said, it's workers' comp. It's the higher legal expenses that we've been incurring, coupled with revenues that aren't quite coming in at the levels we had anticipated them to come in.
And that goes to a really good question. And I guess just for the public, I think one of the things that I think several of us have asked to build into our models as we go forward, because we know we have legal fees, we know we have judgments against us, is we don't have a legal contingency fund. So every time that we get a judgment against us, that comes out of the general fund. And I think it's important for the public to understand that. And while I appreciate the move, and I think it's a very valid effort to move the online sales in the positive direction the first time in years, what is going to be the gap after all of these are said and done between the tax rate that we get when somebody buys something online and if they buy that same product, same price at a bricks and mortar store here?
Eventually, after July 1, it will be the same. So
will that also include the other taxes that we get? And I think this is probably going to be a rhetorical question, because if we don't have a bricks and mortar store here, we don't get the property taxes. And there's also taxes for the people that they employ that then also get figured into our budget too. Is that correct? So while it may be the same on the surface, there are some residual dollars that we don't get.
correct. And ideally, I think the point behind this change at the state level was trying to really level it out so that you're not seeing that impact that what we have seen here in Peoria, which has been the closing of retailers because of what's been happening nationwide with the advent of being able to sit at your couch and click a mouse.
And I think it's a good step forward because it does help level the playing field to some degree. And also with the motor vehicle fuel tax, we're going to be getting some extra dollars that if we put those on top of what we're putting onto roads now, we actually can improve the overall percentage of the roads that we have, as opposed to just doing a swap out and then not putting that money towards, in essence, where it should go. Can you talk a little bit about, and again, great information, expenses that we see that are going to be going up? Are we going to see, because of minimum wage, a compression, and I think that we just need to plan in for over the years? Where are other expenses going to be going up, or maybe that's information you want to bring back to us at a different time?
I think that we would come back to you with some other areas. I think we've continued to look and continue to have concern over our liability and workers' comp. The continued obviously the expenses on the legal side are a concern to us. I think that we've got to also anticipate wage growth. We've got a couple of contracts that are out, so we need to somewhat estimate where those may end as we negotiate those agreements. So there's a few things that are outstanding that are there that are really question marks at this point in time.
So while I see some positive movement in the information that you put to us, I guess I'm a little hesitant to go out and start spending all this money right now because, as you said, some of these dollars that we're going to be getting in from the online sales may need to go to some increased expenses that we have. And so before we go and think that we've hit the lottery, before we start earmarking all those for things to go, we need to make sure that we've take those into account for where all of the expenses are. My last question is, in years past, on our half-year review, it seems like we might actually grow from that July 1st prediction of where the deficit is to where we end up at December 31st. So we're at 600, a little less than 600,000 now, of which is real dollars that we're not going to have from a budget that we said was balanced. So, well, if we go from experience,
Let me
that's
just
good
clarify
growth.
that. We're putting $1.5 million back into fund balance. The budget is balanced. It's how much are we replenishing the general fund to build up our reserves?
And again, let's talk about that fund balance, because there's a reason it's there, the reserve fund, because we're supposed to have those reserve funds to be able to operate. Businesses have to have a 90 so many days of cash liquid to be able to work. Even if we just put in, let's say, the amount that minus the 600,000 that we have here, at what percent are we going to be on our fund balance compared to our overall budget, and where is that compared to where we should be by our own policy that is set by this city council?
If we put the $1.5 million in, we should be closer to 9% of our overall unrestricted fund balance. Our policy is 25%. So, we're on that path. The council made the decision last year during the budget process to say 10 years moving towards building that back up to get back to that point where we're at 25%.
So we're making some progress.
We're making
some
progress.
steps forward.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. The number that I walk away with here is that all things being equal, unless we kind of move this in a different direction in whatever we do, and that's buying local, making sure that we increase those dollars. And I see the census as being very key to this, but I also see the growth of businesses, because both of those groups contribute to the overall budget we see here, because all of them pay property taxes and all of them affect our general fund here in a certain way. Great. Thank you very much for this information.
I had Councilmember Riggenbach next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager and Mr. Scroggins, for the detail here. And this really gives us a great foundation to begin the dialogue with the community as to where we go with the budget. I just will start with the good news portion, and that sales tax change, I think, is something that we've been asking Springfield for a long time. So for them to equalize that, even though it's still a year away, I think that's great news for us. And Councilman Reckriegel, of course, points out very succinctly, though, that the benefit of shopping local isn't just the sales tax that the city gets, but the jobs and the stability that it provides for our neighborhood. So we don't want everybody to go charge up their Amazon cards or whatever they do with that news that they are going to be paying the full sales tax rate starting next July. On the motor fuel tax, Mr. Manager, that $1.4 million increase that will be anticipated, would you just reiterate for us that those will be our discretionary dollars, correct?
It's an increase in our state motor fuel tax distribution. So we'll receive that dollar amount of an additional $1.4 million that we can utilize for road construction.
At our discretion.
Correct.
With our priorities. Backing up to the garbage issue again, I've been beating that horse that we need to charge, that the garbage fee needs to cover the expense of the service we provide. So this continues to be a frustration for me. I would just ask you to consider what, if we don't raise the fee $2, if we leave it at the scheduled $1 increase for 2020, you told Councilman Sear that would leave a $2.6 million hole. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if we raise it, then we would end up with a $164,000 surplus.
Correct.
And that would be the amount that would go to the general fund to reduce that 4.5
Correct.
million. Hypothetically, what if Uncle General Fund tells his nephew, the garbage fund, that he's going to forgive that debt? What?
Well, what would happen is if you forgave it, you would lower your fund balance in the general fund by that corresponding dollar amount.
So right now, that money is not in the general fund. That money's been,
It's an obligation that the garbage fund has to pay back the general fund.
so if that would go away, just let me get this out there, that $2.6 million hole for next year would be what? I mean, I don't expect the answer right this minute, but that increase the garbage fee to $21 would allow the fund to begin to repay the general fund. So that,
If you don't raise that, if you leave it alone, it's still you'll probably have a $500,000 negative fund balance in the general fund, or in the garbage fund again.
because if I'm looking at this slide right, even raising it to $21 only gives us a surplus of $164. So I think I want to just really make sure the council wraps their arms around this, because this is something that's a very defined service. We know exactly what the costs are. So as we move forward, I'll continue to ask us to make sure that that's one that we fully fund. As I've had discussions in the neighborhoods up to this point, and people talking about the budget and what's going to happen next, I think that slide 4 with the head count is something that we all need to make sure that we echo and re-echo as we discuss that with folks, that our head count is at a 25-year low. The services that our citizens expect from the city are probably at a 25-year high also. So let's not diminish the fact that we have fewer people doing more work than ever before. And as has been said, we've got $2 million in expenses to cut, so that's not going to get any easier. But let's just make sure that we're all honest with ourselves where we are as we begin this discussion. And then my last comment, I guess, would be, as the new administration took place in Springfield, there was lots of talk about pension reform, and I know Representative Spain's been on some committees with that, and there's been talk about the governor has a commission. Could you provide us with an update on, is there any tangible headway being made in that regard? And
Well, there were a couple of bills that were introduced this past session. There was some discussion there. The governor has appointed a task force that is looking at this. We'll see if there's anything that moves in the veto session. I would imagine it's probably going to be more likely that something occurs next year in the legislative session then.
Circle back with our legislators and just see if there's any update as far as any specifics, or, that stuff usually comes out at the last minute, I realize, but let's make sure they know that that's still a hot button for us. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ali?
Thank you, Mayor Artis, and thank you, Mr. Manager, for your presentation. First, I want to say I would certainly support using the additional state sales tax revenue to pay down the unfunded liability, either all or part of that. And I really like the idea about using the motor fuel tax toward our roads, because there's just significant need. But I'd like to speak to the fact that we show new revenues in a number of different ways, but I don't see it in terms of projected new revenues from economic development activity. And when we talk about the minimum wage at $15 an hour, I want to point out that MIT developed It was funded by several organizations, the LISC organization, some federal partners, some private funders, to develop what was called a living wage and family sustaining wage calculator. It's found at livingwage.mit.edu. And it's for the entire nation. You can pick the state, and then within the state, you can pick the county that you live in. And within that, you can identify what is the living wage for your particular county. So when we pull up living wage for Peoria, and this is the living wage, is shown as the hourly rate that an individual must earn to support their family if they are the sole provider and are working full-time, 28 hours per year. So the living wage for one adult in Peoria County is $11.37. That's for one adult supporting him or herself. When you add a child to that, the living wage is $24.50 per hour. They also identify what the poverty wage is, and the poverty wage for one adult and one child is very close to our minimum wage of $8.25, which we've had for a number of years. So my concern is that we don't have, and we're not attracting enough companies to our city that pay a living wage or a family sustaining wage. One adult and two children, the living or family sustaining wage for an adult and two children is $29 per hour. We have to, and we'll talk about it, hopefully a lot more in our strategic planning retreats, is what is our plan for attracting more businesses to our area that provide for a family sustaining wage? Because we have many people that are working, but they're living in poverty. Correct. And that has to change to increase the quality of life for people in our area. What we have that some other areas don't have is people. We do have people. They're not all trained. They're not all prepared to earn certain types of wages, but I think we need a plan for that as well, and we can do that in working with our anchor and education and other institutions to raise the credentials of people in our area so that we can attract companies that want a strong workforce. And that's what I'll be talking about and looking forward to discussion in our strategic planning retreats. Thank you, Mayor Artis.
Thank you. Councilman Graham.
Councilor Lee, thank you very much for putting a frame on this. I think we need to put another frame on it. We have emerged from an era where we had 265 days with no budget for the people of this state into a new era where we had a budget that was passed that had bipartisan coloration. For the first time in years, we best be very, very concerned about keeping the progress going in this area, but we also need to be concerned with our federal lawmakers about what that census count is going to involve. Talk about head count? We better be concerned about what that census count is going to include or not include. And that goes right up to our federal lawmakers and our United States senators, because we have a lot of black and brown people in this community who may not be counted, especially people who are brown, if the question is asked about citizenship. The Constitution provides that every 10 years there is, it's redundancy, a decennial census that says every 10 years, not 10 years plus and counting. Doesn't say citizens. It talks about people living here, inhabitants. And monies that we get to help pay for lots of things that help people are impacted by what the federal government will be able to give to us. For example, in the area of community development block grant funds. Huge, huge amount of money that we get for all kinds of things from the federal government. Infrastructure, for example. So if we are underrepresented as a state and we are underrepresented as a community, we're going to take a financial hit, the likes of which you haven't seen in a while. So let's pivot a little bit. Let's be able to walk and chew bubble gum. We can still keep our eye on Springfield, but we darn well better be watching the federal government and what's happening in Washington, D.C. with some of the rank amateurs that are making decisions there right now.
I'm seeing no further lights, Jim, Councilman Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, just some thoughts here real quick on the budget. I think we had some really good conversation here tonight. I especially like some of the comments from Councilwoman Rita Ali. So one of the thoughts I've been thinking about here as we've been working with our committee about smart cities, I think this is something that we should probably be looking into a little bit more closely. Our consumption of energy and fuel, and not that I have a answer for this right now, but it's something that we probably should start the research on as far as electricity, gas, gasoline, just being able to count what we have or what we're using today, and just look to see if there are better ways that we could save in these areas here. And I know in our discussions we were talking about that in our Smart City committee meeting, and I think this is something that should be on our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for anything on preliminary budget discussion here. Mr. Manager, just as a reminder, we'll be starting the budget discussions full-blown.
So that, yes, thank you, Mayor. What we will be doing is after we have our strategic planning session with the council, we will begin to schedule our public outreach meetings and public meetings to talk to where we'll take this out and have those conversations with the public about the overall budget, get that engagement process started with them, and then come back to you to try and at least have another planning session probably in later August where we can hone down what priorities you want to see specifically from a spending perspective in the budget, and then we'll roll that spending plan out to get that back to you in September so we can start the budget deliberations in earnest.
Thank you. We have a motion to receive and file the report. Councilman Sear, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
We're at regular business. 19-235 is a recommendation to award a contract for architectural services related to neighborhood planning, surveys, community engagement, and other services to either Farnsworth Group and or IDG Architects Incorporated.
Councilmember Regenbach.
I would move for approval of awarding the contract to IDG Architects.
Seconded by Councilmember Ali. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to abstain from the vote as I have a relationship with both companies.
Okay, so noted. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this item? Okay, Councilmember Sear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just concerned, obviously, it's very important to provide jobs and bring new companies to the city of Peoria, especially for African American and our minorities. I am concerned reading, as my Mr. Graham, who used to sit beside me, said many times that the devil's in the details. Everything I've read about IDG, and let me be clear, we're talking about a $50,000 contract, which is nothing for IDG or Farnsworth. I'm not concerned about the money. What I'm concerned about when I read the details in IDG is the fact that I don't see anywhere where they would hire local African American, or even the internship says they would be coming in from Houston, Texas. So I'm just very concerned about the way it's worded. I'd like to see I mean, I cannot vote for this contract person the way it's written, but if it would be rewritten where they would say they would hire or use workers from our area and also interns from our area, I'd be all for it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm confused and concerned how we so quickly jumped to propose one solution to this without any discussion or hearing from any of the people who have put in for this bid. So I would be interested in hearing from both of the agencies who have put in for this bid and have them fill us in on their interest in this work, and a little bit about the workforce that they intend to use in this project and where it's coming from.
If they're here in the audience, I suppose we could certainly ask them to come up and talk a little bit about their proposal. I do know that there's a representative of Farnsworth. I haven't met anyone from IDG. If they're here, okay, great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is DeQualis Thompson. I'm Director of Research and Development at IDG Architects. Specifically towards getting community input towards our project, we do plan to partner with a local nonprofit, PCCEO, that actually operates in the area, and they plan to give out surveys and hold certain town hall meetings, so we do get input from those in the area. So specifically to answer your question.
Proposal, it talks about the fact that the analysis here and recommendations would be done by students from other states. Why not look at local talent here? We pride our community on our educational institutions, and why would ours not fit that bill?
We did make attempts initially to find some people locally. However, we found that there weren't the pool of architects within our profession that we could garner as quickly as we needed to for this project, unfortunately. But we would be willing to take a second look.
So you're telling me you could not find one educated architect in this community getting a degree that would fit this type of work?
Not within the time frame and not that had the qualifications we were looking for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I may, council members, my name's Aaron Gunn, and I am the business manager for the IDG Architects Peoria office. One of the key components of this project was to include a diverse pool of architectural students. And the issue was not the actual level of education or the capabilities of the students that are here locally, but there was not a significant amount of diverse students who study architecture locally. And a part of our mission at IDG Architects is to attract a more diverse pool of architects. Less than 0.5% of all licensed architects in the nation are African American. And one of the things that we want to accomplish here with this project, and in general, with our location of establishing an office here in Peoria, is to allow a more diverse pool of people to learn about the field of architecture, to be exposed to architecture, and to basically broaden their aspirational goals. So we want the community members who will be targeted by this project, for lack of a better word, to see people who will look like them so that they can relate to them and also be exposed to the field of architecture and some of the other professional services that are out there if they pursue that route in their education.
Okay. Any other questions for the representatives? Okay. Farnsworth, Mr. Forrest.
Good evening. I'm Don Forrest with Farnsworth Group, Business Development Manager, and I will let you know right up front that I am not the project manager nor involved with this project. I came here as a courtesy and to see what was going on, but I do know a little bit about this project. Everybody in this list of individuals, interns, students, certainly staff are from here, to respond to your question. If not Peoria proper, Central Illinois. I noticed there are a few of our team members are from, I believe, the Champaign office, but we're all Central Illinois people, including our interns and our students. And only one of the interns I noticed went to another university outside the state of Illinois, so we're all certainly more or less local people. And by local, again, I include this whole Central Illinois area, but a majority of those people are. And the gentleman just described the quandary that we all have with both architecture and civil engineering, and just the sheer numbers of minorities is difficult to find staff. I don't know how we do that, but I do know, as communicated to staff and the shareholders, that there's a very earnest effort to gain that sort of diversity in our company, which is traditionally an engineering architecture company is a challenge. And I think it's worded in here, I recall 30% of our staff is either minority or female. 13% of the shareholders, roughly the same breakout, between 13% of shareholders. So the effort's being made, but our focus was on our credentials, our familiarity with the area, and not only our staff, the people that were on this team, were selected because of the work that they've done in this community. So our staff is going to know many of the folks, many of the nonprofits, many of the citizens that live in this area. We've done this work. So we had to rely essentially on our credentials, not only our expertise in all the various disciplines, from the engineering side to the surveying to the facility design, but the fact that we've done so many projects like this in the city of Peoria in these neighborhoods. So our laurels, I guess, are the credentials that we bring to this project, and the fact that we are entirely local to this community in Central Illinois. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I had Councilmember Gray up next.
It's Aaron Williams, correct? Could you come on up again? I wanted to follow up before Farnsworth weighed in. I think one of the points that I'm hearing from you, and welcome to Peoria City Council chambers tonight, is that the young people we'll be bringing in will hopefully be able to excite a lot of our own kids with their backgrounds and interest in architecture. So while they may not be indigenous right now, they're going to be working with folks in these corridors and in our community, so we could have quite an exponential growth in interest in the African American community in the area of architecture, which is currently greatly underrepresented. Is that basically where you were going, Aaron, on that, Mr. Williams?
Absolutely. That's 100% correct.
Thank you. That was not lost on me at all, and I appreciate your coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ali?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Artis. I think we have a choice between two very professional firms that are both local. Of course, Farnsworth has been here for a long time, and I am very pleased that IDG has decided to open an office right here in Peoria. I applaud you for that. I think, we've talked a lot about minority contracting, and we don't have a lot of local professional firms in terms of choosing minority contractors. In this case, we have the uniqueness of a minority African-American owned architecture firm, and having been in education for as long as I have, I know that it's rare to find African Americans in this field. Qualifications include oftentimes LEED certified architects. They're hard to find. We even hear that from, the majority firms, that we can't get enough minorities in our workforce. So, the choice is easy for me this time around to choose IDG for this opportunity, and I encourage my fellow council members to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Aaron, if I could ask you just one more question, please. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Just want to make sure you've been in Peoria. Obviously, you're like me, you're transplant. How long have you been in Peoria with your firm?
Actually, I've been here for 15 years. I was hired by IDG upon opening an office and basically tasked to get the office off the ground. Our owner, who is based out of Houston, and that's where our corporate headquarters is located, decided to invest in the city of Peoria.
Great.
And one of his first investments, quite frankly, was hiring me.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Your office has been open for how long?
Since June of 2018.
June of 2018.
Approximately 1 year.
Okay, congratulations. Now, moving forward, we'll need some more business, obviously, from the city also, right? To be successful. I mean, just one $50,000 contract is not it's not going to be enough to survive in Peoria. So you'll need some other contracts. Right. One question, I don't know if you have access. Do you have access to report or research that says, I mean, I'm glad, no, let's be transparent. If we need to bring some minority businesses from outside Peoria to get our kids excited in school about being an architect, I'm all for it. But do you have access to any report or research? How long did it take for you to make that kind of effect, I guess, a positive effect on our kids in school? So they'd say, hey, I see a guy, like me here, I'd like to be an architect. Any research like that available?
I don't know if any research exists that points to how a child being exposed to a certain field will impact their decisions or ability to go into that field. But I do believe that exposure, specifically to professional services, to African American children in this city, will have a significant impact on their outlook on life. I can't point to any data that proves that, but I just believe that will be the case because they're not exposed to professional positions and definitely not exposed to professionals who essentially look like them and identify with them.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes with 6 ayes, 2 noes, and 1 abstention. Voting no, Councilmember Sear and Euler. Madam Clerk.
We're at 19-236. There's a communication from Councilmember Montalongo with a request to approve the following. A is to adopt an ordinance amending the City of Peoria 2019 revised annual budget relating to the use of the general fund balance to provide funding to subsidize the discount on the purchase of Ring security equipment in the amount of $50,000, and B is a sole source contract with Ring to subsidize the discount on the purchase of Ring security equipment with a 50-50 contribution from Ring and the City of Peoria in an amount up to $50,000 each.
Thank you. Councilmember Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to be moving for a deferral till our next meeting.
Motion to defer to the next meeting, seconded by Councilmember Moore. Discussion on the deferral. Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
We're at unfinished business.
Any unfinished business to come before the council? Unfinished? Okay. Madam Clerk, seeing none?
We would be at new business.
New business to come before the council tonight. Any new business? Councilman Rodrigo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a, I guess, quick question for our staff, city manager. Several years ago, I remember being on a commission, and we went through a process of updating what was supposed to be an annual work plan. It had been a couple of years since we had done that, and it really helped organize the commission into what sort of they were going to be working on over the next 12 months, what staff was going to be involved, and actually making, in that case, some progress forward and some things that maybe the commission could be of use for in that communication gap with the public. And I believe at that time, all the commissions were updating some work plans. It's been a little bit since I've seen that, that we've done that. Maybe I've missed that, but wondering if we can look at our commissions to update their work plans. I think what it does for us as a council is it helps us know kind of what their thoughts are about where their kind of work will be placed over the next 12 months. And what was kind of nice, I know, for us was it was commission-based up to the council, so it was great information for us to be able to have some real input on that at the commission level. So wondering if maybe we can set a time frame that where the commissions can work on that, and maybe that can be part of the January 1 year in 2020.
Sure. We'd be happy to work on that.
Great.
Thank you. Councilman Riggenbach, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple quick things. Chief Marion, I want to give a salute to you and your officers for the work on the 4th of July. The East Bluff neighborhood, even social media offers their thanks to you, so you know you did something right. We appreciate your efforts being out there personally in the neighborhoods. That really speaks volumes to all of our citizens, so thank you. And thank you to the people in the neighborhoods for being respectful of each other and choosing the right time to shoot off their own personal fireworks. So, second thing, at our next council meeting on July 23rd, we will be bringing forth an ordinance defining a proposed special service area in the East Bluff. This will be the first step that we need to do to get what we used to call the East Bluff Neighborhood Housing Service, SSA, established. So we want to be able to gauge the citizens' interest for continuing that. That SSA does expire at the end of the year, and there's no more extensions allowed by ordinance. So July 23rd, we will be bringing an ordinance for the council to approve the defining of a proposed SSA, and then within 60 days, we will have a public hearing in that East Bluff neighborhood to gauge the sentiment for that. Speaking of the neighborhoods, I'm sure Councilwoman Moore is going to bring this up as well, but community development has been working with IDA on revitalization plans for the south side as well as the East Bluff. So I'll just say the East Bluff neighborhood meeting will be on July 17th at 6 p.m. at the community center, and we invite everybody who filled out a survey to come out, and we really want to hear your input for what the revitalization strategy can and should look like. So that'll be July 17th at the East Bluff Community Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ali.
Thank you, Mayor Artis. In 2016, the council adopted an ordinance on police and fire diversity, and since that time, there's been an annual update on progress as it relates to the items within that ordinance. And I just wanted to ask the city manager when that update might occur, because it's usually in July, I believe, and who, in the past, it's been the Fire and Police Commission, I think, that was responsible for kind of bringing it to the table.
We plan on having the update we received. Some of the information from the police department and the fire department. We'll have that update for you at the next council meeting.
Wonderful.
So we'll be able to give that update to you at that point in time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to tag on to what Councilman Rickenbach talked about as far as the meetings that are scheduled in our communities with, he indicated IDA. IDA stands for Illinois Housing Development Authority. And because of the neighborhood plans that are being corridor plans that are trying to be created for the near south side, near north side, and East Bluff, the Illinois Housing Development Authority will be coming down from Chicago for an overnight visit to have these meetings for the near south side and near north side. The near south side meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 16th from 6 to 7:30 at the Frank Campbell Center. And the near north side meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, July 17th from 3 to 4:30 at Reachway Church at 1203 Northeast Peoria. Now, I understand that some of these times may not be convenient for everybody, but the cards that we have that have been going around in the community have indicated that everyone is welcome at every meeting, whether you live in that community or not. You can come to that other meeting. If you can't make the 6 to 7:30 on the south side, and that's where you live, you're welcome to come to the 3 to 4:30 on the north side. And if you can't make the south side or the north side meeting, you're welcome to go to the East Bluff meeting on that Wednesday from 6 to 7:30. So you're not precluded from going to any of the meetings because you will hear basically the same thing, and the nuance is about that particular area. But the general information is really is the takeaway. And so look for these cards to be passed out around the community. And I'm very happy that our community development department even have on the back, it's in Spanish. So that tells you that we're trying to be very cognizant of the diversity in our city. So just look for those meetings. And the second item, now that the vote has been taken and we're on our way to something else, I would be remiss if I didn't make a comment about the question about what type of result do we see when kids see other people doing jobs? I think that's a huge, huge, huge outcome that you see. When children see people doing jobs, school teachers, firemen, police officers, attorneys, dentists, they have something that they can aspire to. And when they see someone, speaking as an African-American female, let me tell you, when I see someone that looks like me doing a certain type of job, when I was little, that gave me confidence that I can do that too. You know, I grew up in first generation college graduate, I was. And it was huge when I saw people who were doing other jobs. I wanted to be an attorney, but my family could not afford to send me to law school. And so I didn't settle for what I'm doing now because I love what I'm doing now in economic development. But it is huge. We have a program every year now called Career Spark, where we send thousands of kids go into Civic Center. And there are all kinds of professions around, and they go and they hear these folks talk about what they do so that we can aspire, these kids can be aspire to different kinds of professions. So absolutely, we need African Americans and Hispanics and Asians of all doing all kind of careers and having kids look at those folks and say, I can do that too. I can now see my grandson as a president of the United States because we had an African American president of the United States. I never thought in my lifetime, I didn't think I would live to see the day. I didn't think I would live to see the day where we had a black man as an African American president because of how this society has treated minorities during my lifetime. You know, I don't have to work at being an African American. I wake up every morning and I look in the mirror and I see who I am and I see how that impacts me. I've been impacted by racism and discrimination personally, not something somebody told me about, something I experienced as a teenager and as an adult in my work world. And there is no way I'm going to sit here on this council and allow the continuation of the status quo. And because there's always some reason why some minority cannot be selected. There's always a reason. And I contend that we have to put that away. We have to look, this is a new world. This is the 21st century. And we have to make ways for other folks who are minorities and LGBTQ and disabled and all kinds of people. I tell my daughter this. It takes a lot of different types of ingredients that go into a salad to make a beautiful, delicious salad. And similarly with people, if we don't embrace the diversity and find ways to break through some of the institutional racism that has permeated our country, we are not going to succeed. And so I thank you all for voting the way you did, because we had two fine, excellent companies. Farnsworth, I can't speak enough about Farnsworth, what they do in the community, what they've done for organizations that I'm connected to. That company, every time you look around, they are donating, they are supporting, they are a fantastic company. And I can't say enough great things about them. And IDG is similar, a company that moved an office, opened an office in Peoria. They didn't have to, because there's not a whole lot of work necessarily that is going to minority companies. They knew that when they came here. But they came here anyway. And I'm going to have to thank Larry Ivory of the Black Chamber, because he recruited them here. You may not recall, but he also recruited a company that's been here now about 12 years, Infrastructure Engineering, right across the street here on Fulton, an African-American-owned engineering firm that was recruited to come to Peoria. A Peoria that's now listed as the 5th worst place for African-Americans to live. And we wonder why. You know, we give contracts on a every 2-week basis of hundreds of thousands of dollars to companies, all sole source, because they're the only one doing it, sole source. They're not from Peoria, but we give it away anyway. So I'm gonna pull it in now, but suffice it to say that the vote that you took tonight to approve IDG as the lead in this project suggests that there is hope for Peoria to embrace all peoples of all colors and all persuasions, no matter their disability, no matter their gender. And I thank you.
Okay. Any additional new business? Councilman Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. This request kind of goes out to the police chief. I'm looking for I was trying to run some crime mapping reports, and it only goes back so far. So what I'm looking for is a report over the last 5 months on vehicle break-ins, residential burglary, and I'd like to have that broken out by each month, or I'm sorry, each district. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Artis. I see Director Lewis is here. Director Lewis, the City of Peoria recently announced an initiative that would be available in terms of applications for some of our citizens in the neighborhoods as it relates to our stormwater infrastructure repair. Could you give a little bit of information on that? And thank you for having this posted on the Nextdoor app, but I don't think we can do enough to get the word out on this.
Yeah, we have a couple of opportunities for the community to relieve some kind of relief for their stormwater utility, and all those are being rolled out now. We have some grants that are out there, so we have the SWIG, which is I'm trying to think of the acronym now, but it's a stormwater investment grant for everybody, and then there is always the property, the personal property grant as well for everyone as well. So there are a couple things out there for people other than just the simple things that we've been doing in the past with the rain barrels and things like that, and the retention areas and detention basins.
Give an example of how Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner might be able to help themselves by applying for this money, and I believe the deadline is the end of August, the 31st.
Yeah, all of the information is on the website, but if you really have questions about it, the best way to get information is to call the Public Works Department and speak directly with our stormwater people, because they can give you the best information. It's all there to be read. Sometimes reading through that stuff is difficult. The best way to get it is just please call us at the office, and we can direct you through those things.
And of course, right now there are people listening via radio and hopefully our Channel 22 tonight. And we're going to get the word out that this pool of money is available. Sorry about the word pool. And this could help some of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Moore.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I had one other thing. On tomorrow at 6 o'clock at the Minority Business Development Center, the local foods group has will be responding to the, will be revealing the survey, the grocery store survey that has been taken in the community about the need for a grocery store. So you were invited to come from 6 to 8 p.m. at 2139 Southwest Adams at the Minority Business Development Center. Tori Dahlworth-Hoff, I'm sorry, Tori, I'm butchering your last name, is going to be there with his team providing the survey results regarding grocery stores. And this is specifically to address the grocery stores that closed on the East Bluff and the one that is south of Peoria on Harmon Highway. Thank you.
Any further new business? I have one real quick one for you, Mr. Manager. It was mentioned earlier during one of the discussions, the importance of our census. As we all know, we'll be undertaking a very important census. 10 years ago, that time, Councilmember Spain headed up that initiative for us and did a really good job. This time around, I asked Councilman Ruckriel if he'd take that on, and he said he would. But I think it would be a really good idea, since we're starting to get a lot of community interest in what we're doing and what they can do to help. And, you know, we really want to ensure a good count across the city. So maybe put an agenda item on there to help the public understand what we have going on, how they can contribute, and anything we can do to make sure we get a real strong count. Thank you. I'm seeing no further lights. Madam Clerk?
We're at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council.
It doesn't look like I have any cards here, but if there's anyone that wants to address the City Council, you're welcome to. Okay, seeing none.
We have an executive session.
Mr. Leist?
Yes, Your Honor. A motion would be appropriate pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act, which exempts discussions relative to performance of a specific employee, as well as 2C21, which exempts discussions and allows an executive session approval of previously closed minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to go into executive session. Councilman Sear, seconded. Councilman Euler, please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously, and we have a motion to adjourn by Councilmember Moore, seconded by Councilmember Riggenbach. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. We'd like to thank H. Wayne Wilson and his listening audience at WCBU, as well as Cable Channel 22. This evening's meeting is adjourned.